Welcome to Pastors and People 2, the podcast where spirituality and daily living intersect. Your host, a Methodist pastor, invites you on a journey through the sacred pages of the Bible, exploring how its timeless wisdom illuminates our path in this ever-changing world. Each week, we'll delve into scripture, share stories of inspiration, and reflect on current events through the lens of faith. Whether you're seeking guidance, inspiration, or simply a moment of peace in your busy day, join us as we discover together how the divine can transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's start the conversation. This is Pastors and People 2, where every story matters and every voice is heard. Welcome aboard.
Hello and welcome to Pastors and People 2. I am Pastor Charlene Thomas, here with my husband, David Thomas, who thought this was a good idea and is now having many, many regrets. Absolutely. So welcome, yes. Welcome to Pastors and People 2.
So to get started, I wanted to touch just on some basic things, like why did you choose Methodism?
Why did I choose Methodism? Methodism chose me. So I say that jokingly, but I think it really did. It's like buying a house. As stupid as that seems, it's where you feel at home. And I grew up in another faith tradition. I grew up Roman Catholic, and had a wonderful experience in the Catholic Church. Went to Catholic school. And then in my early 20s, felt as if God was calling me to something different. And so then I was kind of a gypsy for a while, wandered around, and finally found a friend first in the United Methodist Church. And that's so often how we find our homes, whether it be in hobbies or in faith or anywhere, is you find a friend first. And I did. I found a friend who is still my beloved friend to this day, Reverend Donna Van Trees. And she was my friend. She was my boss for a while. She's now my district superintendent again, so I guess she's my boss again.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that's what led me to the United Methodist Church, and then it was just home.
That's awesome. Are there key things that you were looking for that being a United Methodist filled?
I think that in the Catholic Church, I felt more, it was very passive. I wasn't asked to participate as much as maybe I wanted to, or that my spirit was wanting to. And so when I left the Catholic Church, I was looking for something that was more relational, I guess. And United Methodism is very relational, very based on relationships with Jesus, with one another, with your pastor. And that's just the Wesleyan part of who we are as United Methodist. John Wesley, the founder of Methodism, was very, very intentional about relationships.
And you have said more than a few times that inside the Methodist Church, one of the good things is everybody has a voice, and one of the bad things is everybody has a voice.
Are we putting that out on the internet that I've said that?
No, I'll cut it.
Right.
So I can definitely see where that's good and bad, but it also shows that the people inside the church matter, and can affect the church.
The people are the church.
Right.
I think that's the one of the big misunderstandings. People think of the church as just an institution, but there is no institution without the people. And so in United Methodism, there is much emphasis on the laity, so the lay people of the church, that it is not a top-down sort of system. It is very much bottom-up or grassroots. Lay people in the United Methodist Church have the power to bring issues to any level, whether it be at the local church, in your district, in your conference, which is the large region that we are in. We are in the East Ohio Conference. And so you have the ability to take anything from the local church level up to serving at General Conference, which is the worldwide the worldwide gathering to help form the church.
And that's awesome. I think it shows a lot of power to the people.
Methodism started as a movement.
Right.
It didn't start as an institution. It started as a movement that began in Europe and came over to the United States. And so it's always been about people moving the gospel forward.
And the small community churches can have the same voice that the larger churches in the same area might have.
They can. It's when we go to our annual conference, it's an equal number of clergy and lay persons. And so it doesn't matter if you come from a church that has 10 people worshiping on Sunday morning, or if you come from a church that has 1,000 people worshiping, which there are both. And it doesn't matter. It just matters that you're there and that you are taking this responsibility seriously and having your voice heard and your vote heard.
Now, since we also mentioned local churches, do you want to talk about just briefly the churches that you serve?
Sure. So I am part of a cooperative parish, which is a fairly new configuration in East Ohio. I am lead pastor at 2 churches, but I am appointed to 5 churches along with another pastor. So I am the lead pastor at Tiffin St. Paul's United Methodist Church, which is here in Tiffin, and also Republic Trinity, which is in Republic, about 20 minutes or 15 on Sunday mornings as we drive. And then my co-pastor is the lead pastor of the other 3, which is Faith United Methodist in Tiffin, Melmore United Methodist, and Sycamore. So together, we are called the 5 Points Parish because there are 5 points, 5 churches. And we believe strongly that we can do a lot more together than we can separated.
Now, you said it was a cooperative parish. How does that differ from what people know of or used to know of as a charge?
Talking like a preacher's kid.
Yes,
He's using
absolutely.
the lingo. So a charge is just churches, multiple churches that share a pastor. So you never, or you rarely will cross the boundary. If you belong to Church A, you won't really work with the Church B people very much. You just happen to share a pastor. That's a charge. A cooperative parish is intentional about working together, doing things together, worshiping together, while maintaining their own structure, their own mission, their own identity, because each of these churches is completely different from the other. And we want them to maintain their unique, authentic personality. But we also know that there's a lot more that we can do if we work together. And so we live by the words that we're better together.
Absolutely. And to kind of illustrate that, you have a Fatheads in Faith Bible study.
That's right.
On Sunday, which is held at Fatheads Restaurant in Republic, Ohio, which is wonderful food.
It's amazing. Check it out.
Absolutely.
The Game Changer.
Game changer. Best
Is a
pizza.
game changer.
Absolutely
Best
is.
pizza ever.
Yep, I got to spread that word a little bit this last Sunday.
That's right.
That's held on the first Sunday of the month.
Right. It's
And-
Bible study in a bar.
In a bar. And how many of our churches were represented at this one Bible study?
3 of the 5 churches had people in attendance at Fatheads in Faith this past Sunday. And we have people that are from the community that don't attend regularly any of our churches, but they feel more comfortable coming and hanging out at Fatheads.
They do.
Yeah.
And we're getting pretty well known there at Fatheads Restaurant.
We
I
are.
think.
We are.
Shout out to Bailey, who is our
favorite server,
Our
Bailey.
favorite server,
No
yeah.
shade to the other servers at Fatheads. They're all fantastic. But Bailey can hang with our group.
Absolutely.
Yeah, she can take the ribbing that we give to her, and she gives it right back. She takes great care of us. So yeah, Bailey's good people.
Yeah, she's awesome. And that has really grown. Like, I think
It
the first
has.
time we had it, we had 5 people maybe.
Something like that.
Yeah, and
It's amazing what good food will do.
good food will always do that.
It pulls them right in.
Absolutely. And then I also wanted you to mention why you wanted to do this podcast and the story behind pastors and people too.
So the story behind the name or the story behind the actual podcast?
Okay, let's go with the name,
Okay.
and then let's talk about what you want people to get out of this podcast.
So the name Pastors and People Too is kind of a double meaning. The first, I'm a second career pastor, so I was in healthcare before answering my call, trying not to answer my call, incidentally, which that can be an episode down the road of how I ran further than I've ever run in my life for any other reason, but tried to outrun this call. But I've noticed that people tend to treat pastors differently. People will meet me and know me and, have a certain demeanor or way with me, and then they'll say, "So what do you do for a living?" And I say, "I'm a pastor." And there's this moment. Like all of a sudden they start to edit themselves. They start to change the way they're talking, maybe some of the language that they've used, or maybe they hold back from certain jokes or things. And
They also kind of look a little bit more at you too, right?
They do. At times, they do. If I meet someone in a social situation, this has happened, where they don't expect a pastor to be hanging out. Those, you're a pastor kind of thing. And so I think my greatest hope for pastors and people too is that people will realize that pastors are people too, that they will understand that we are people that struggle with going to church sometimes. We are people that struggle with our own faith. We're people that struggle with our kids. We struggle with our marriages. We struggle with everything. We struggle with what people think of us. We struggle to have friends a lot. Pastors are lonely people. And no one ever talks about that. So I am very transparent, I guess. I'm me. Doesn't matter if it's Sunday morning and I'm at church, or if it's Tuesday night and I'm, hanging out with my kids, or it doesn't matter if I'm with friends. I'm the same no matter what. So I just want people to understand their pastor a little bit better. Definitely understand me a little bit better. So that's one part of pastors and people too, is that pastors are people too. The other is that I want to invite some cool guests to come along with us and talk about different experiences that they've had and questions they have with their faith life and questions they have about the church, and even talk about some of the things that we don't like about the church, things that we are frustrated and struggle with.
There's a lot of church hurt out there.
There's a lot of church hurt. And the first thing that we can do to heal some of that is to acknowledge it. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's no harm. There's no further harm in acknowledging. There's further harm that comes when we refuse to acknowledge and refuse to change. And I think that there's nothing better than the church when we get it right.
Absolutely.
It is the most beautiful thing. It's a place where heaven touches earth. Mm-hmm. And so my hope is that we can string together a whole bunch of get it right moments. Absolutely. And help people remember what Jesus intended the church to be. So hopefully we'll get to share some cool stories with folks. So that's the other side of pastors and people too. Sometimes there'll be other people. You won't just have to listen to me talk. As entertaining as I find myself, you won't have to just listen to me.
You are very entertaining. Yes. That's why you should definitely be in front of the camera.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I resisted it for so long.
COVID changed everything.
COVID was the death of my argument as to I will not listen to myself or see myself. And then COVID said, hold on.
Hold on. Yeah. Now we've been, since the beginning of 2020, we've been streaming online services. And I think one good aspect of this is on Sundays, you only get people for 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah, and that's back to what you asked, why do you want to do this? That's why.
Yeah.
I have a minimal amount of time to talk about the things of Jesus, the things of God, the things that the Holy Spirit moves us to talk about. And people are so busy now. And it's so hard to get us to nail ourselves down and pay attention to anything. We're like a TikTok culture,
Yeah.
you know, a couple minutes and we're ready to move on to the next thing. And so for me to sit and talk to someone, or sit and preach a message that's 20 minutes, it just felt like I wanted people to get more. And there was more I wanted to say, but not as much time. And so I thought we could spend some time together in this podcast, in this time. We could spend a little bit more time, go a little deeper.
And I think that's a good lead into, so this past Sunday, we did a covenant renewal. And is it a Wesleyan covenant renewal?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, I thought it was a very neat service, but I think
Did you really?
Yeah. But you really have to listen to the words, which,
Yeah.
If you want to listen to that, I'll have a link to it in the description of this podcast so that you can listen to the sermon, watch the whole service if you would like. I'll have that link too. But to really see what I don't want to say vows, but would you say vows?
Kinda.
Okay.
It's like having a pinky promise with Jesus.
Yeah.
It is. And I think it's important. The Wesleyan covenant service dates back to the 1700s when Wesley initiated the idea that we should have this intentional time that we can make promises to God. And we hesitate, I think, sometimes in the church to commit fully because God is this unknown thing. And you're never sure what God's going to require of you. And so to pray the prayer that Wesley prays, to say the words that God, thy will be done. I surrender myself to you. I give you my thoughts, my actions, put me to work, put me to rest, to surrender that kind of control. That's an uncomfortable thing.
It is.
And so we hesitate to do that in the church. In the one place that we probably should do it, we hesitate because it's on the other side of that covenant is a God that we feel is unknown, even though we have the scriptures that make promises for our good and God's plans for us to prosper us. So some people really love the covenant stuff. Some people really dig kind of the liturgy.
You're a person who digs it.
I'm a little bit of a nerd, but not as liturgically nerdy as some of my clergy friends. I'm pretty low key. There are some clergy friends out there that think I'm like, Christian light probably. That's all right.
But I think a lot of people, I don't know about a lot of people, but I think some people will go through a service like that and they just repeat what they see on the screen.
Right.
And not really look at or not really feel what you're saying.
Because I think there's a fear that stops you sometimes. I think also that we do tend to, at times, just get, we're kind of like Ron Burgundy. Whatever's up on the big screen, we'll just say it.
Right. Yeah.
Like, his teleprompter, he just, whatever you put up there, he would read.
Yes.
And so I wonder if I put it up on the screen in the church, will you all just read it? We should try that sometime.
We should.
That would be wrong. I'm not going to do that.
You could blame it on the AV people.
If my bishop is listening, I will not put whatever I want on the screen, as far as you know. But I do think we get into this, it's bold. That's my part. And I try to slow down and caution people and say, listen to what you're saying.
Yeah.
These are the promises you're making in the United Methodist Church. And I think we're going to talk about this in future episodes because we're doing some stuff on membership right now. We make promises to each other. We make promises to, each other in the congregation. We make promises to the church. We make promises to be part of the denomination and to try to better it. And ultimately, all of those promises are to God.
Right.
And so I think it's important to pause and not just anchorman yourself through the liturgy.
Right.
Really pay attention to what you're saying.
And it's in every ceremony type thing that we do, even like baptisms and just accepting new members. We have promises that we're making in each one of those.
Well, we're Methodist. There's a method to our faith.
There's a method to everything.
Yeah.
We do.
So there is a definite thread that goes through all of our faith practices, and a lot of it is our commitment to one another and ultimately our commitment to God.
Yeah, I think that's great.
So on that note, be a United Methodist.
That's right.
Not a very good commercial, maybe.
Maybe not, but we'll get to some good ones, I'm sure. I was raised in Methodist church.
Not just raised in the Methodist Church.
Right.
He was a pastor's kid.
That's right.
In the United Methodist Church.
My dad was a pastor for 40 years. But that is, again, another illustration, because even though my dad was heavy in the church, my mom was heavy in the church, I really was just present, and I did not take a lot of the stuff to heart. So as you're going through things, I'm in the same boat with a lot of people in your congregation. I don't really know what procedures and what things are out there in the Methodist Church. I should know a lot more than I do, being raised in the church. I should know all the procedures and stuff, but I don't. So I am looking forward, actually, to the stuff that you're going to go through about membership of the church and stuff like that, kind of like Methodist 101, I guess. I'm looking forward to that and see what I learn out of it.
I think that we tend to beat ourselves up when we realize, like, oh, I've been here, but I haven't really been a part.
Right.
And I don't think that you should. I think that the first promise that we make, which I don't think is a coincidence in our membership vows, is presence, because you have to start somewhere. Mm-hmm. And everyone is present before they participate. So just being present, though you don't want to stay in that kind of passive presence forever, there's something to be said for presence.
Right.
And it's a good place to begin. But then as you become more comfortable, more acclimated, and start to build those relationships, that's what it comes down to at the end of the day, is a relationship with God and a relationship with the people in your church. And if you don't have that, chances are you won't be in that church for very long. It all comes down to relationships, and relationships beyond the pastor. Mm-hmm. Because in the United Methodist Church, we move. We serve at the pleasure of our bishop, which means if the bishop calls, then come July 1st, we could be in a completely different place. So if you are only attached to the pastor of a church, in the United Methodist Church, that can be problematic.
It can be, because my dad tended to move on average every 3 years, and he was East Ohio Conference.
He was West.
He was West Ohio. You're right. I'm sorry. He was West Ohio Conference. I don't know if it was maybe the bishop they had then or whatever, but I know a lot of him and his friends moved quite frequently. So the family moved quite frequently. Mm-hmm. Never got really attached to any churches, and I think that's incredibly sad. But that's just part of being a Methodist, is the pastors tend to move around a little bit.
And I think you said you didn't get attached to any church. I think for pastors and their family, and this is another one of those insights that maybe people don't realize or don't think about that you might hear here at Pastors and People Too, is that we as clergy and our family will tend to keep people a little further than some, because we know that we are not permanent fixtures
Yes.
in this community. And so as much as, and I love my church folks. I mean, I love them. And it's hard to think that someday I'm not going to be here in this place. It's really hard because I get very, very connected to them. But as a kid, you knew we're not going to be here in a couple years.
Right.
And that's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah, because it made it tough to try to even make friends as a kid, knowing that you weren't going to be there for very long.
Yeah.
So.
But I've been in this appointment. Actually, the appointment has changed because we've had churches come in, have churches go out. It's kind of like, doing a little hokey pokey.
Right.
But I've been here in Tiffin. I was in Tiffin before I went into the ministry. Mm-hmm. So I've been in this appointment for 7 years.
Yeah.
Which is a long time.
That is a long time, yeah.
Yeah. And hoping to stay.
And I know all the work that you've put into your churches and the other churches in the parish. And I think they have definitely grown, and they're a lot better since you've been there.
Yeah, I think that they were good when I got here.
Yep.
And I think that churches go through different seasons. Just like there's a season for everything, there are different seasons for churches, and there are some times when somebody said once that churches are like lungs, like they expand with air and then they decrease, and I think that is definitely true. And so I think we've been in a season of expanding. It's also been hard. I mean, we had COVID in there. We've had the aging church. We've had just people struggle with religion anyway.
Sure.
And but yeah, and God's still doing some pretty good work here.
I think so, and I think right now a lot of people are looking for connectivity, because even though we are the most connected right now with social media and all that, we are also the loneliest right now.
Yeah. And again, I'm gonna say it 100 times, it all comes back to our relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about?
I'm just glad that people are here. I hope that they can come here for an easy listen that entertains, but also intrigues. I'm hoping that we can get some interaction. I'd love for people to send us questions, not necessarily stump the pastor, but maybe try to stump the pastor.
Yes, I will have the email up.
Yeah, I just really want people to have a place where they can. I love questions in faith, whether it be questions about the church, questions about God. I think there's no better place for you to question things than in the church, and that hasn't always been people's experience. So I would love for people to interact with us and ask us things and listen and get a little bit more insight.
That's also part of the Methodism too, is asking questions. It's not wrong to ask questions.
No, I have often said, and say this in Bible study a lot, when people speak in absolute terms about divine things, I get very nervous.
Right.
Because we should stand in awe and wonder all the time. And to think that we've got God figured out means that we've taken God and lowered him to an understandable and comprehensible level. And that's not where God resides. So there should always be things that we have no idea how to explain, and that's the exciting part.
Absolutely.
So I want people to get excited about that. So I'm really looking forward to seeing, if anybody even listens, because I'm pretty convinced that it's just you and I talking, and that's where it's going to land. So
I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to be pushing this out, and so we've talked about in future episodes you want to have guests and get stories from them and talk about their experiences. And also we've talked about reading questions. So there will be, once we get questions, then there will be like a mailbag portion of the podcast.
Which will not be called mailbag.
No.
That's a terrible,
That's a
terrible name.
Okay,
I would say
so we'll
no
think
dumb
about that.
questions, but a couple football players already do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Although that is good. I
Stump
like
the
that.
pastor.
No, I wouldn't want to call it Stump the
You don't want, well, I don't want to call it Stump the pastor.
We'll come up with a good name
Yeah.
for it. Are there other things that you really want to look forward to coming out of this, or
I'm just
seeing where it goes?
seeing where it goes. Yeah,
Awesome.
it's just one more thing that you have worn me down and I have agreed to do
Yeah.
to stop the nagging. And here we are. And you're welcome, America.
That's right. We'll see. I think this is going to be a pretty good format,
I think so too.
and also let people get a little bit more in depth into what exactly United Methodism is.
That's right.
Is there anything else you want to talk about today?
I don't think so. I think that's a wrap for today. I think we need to go and give them some heaven.
There you go. Give them some heaven.
Give them heaven.
That's great words to end on. Thank you all very much for listening. Give us a like on whatever platform that you're listening to us on, or on YouTube. Follow us. That always helps. So that's fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. See you next time.